Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right into a massive topic that is practically dominating global mobility conversations right now, the recent US visa freezes. We're going to unpack exactly what these freezes actually mean, and more importantly, we'll discover how global investors can strategically navigate around them. Let's dive right in.
So, when the news of a visa freeze drops, the immediate reaction is almost always panic. It naturally begs the big question, right? Does a visa freeze just end all immigration options? High net worth investors all over the globe are literally asking themselves this exact question today. It's super common to just assume that a freeze means a complete dead stop halt to all US residency pathways. But as we're going to uncover in a few minutes, that is simply not the case. The immigration landscape is incredibly nuanced, and a freeze doesn't hit every pathway equally.
All right, to find the solution, we first need to define the situation we're in. A U.S. visa freeze usually rolls out via executive directives. In this case, we're talking about proclamations 1094-9 and 1099-8. Basically, these suspend the issuance of certain visa categories from nationals from over 75 countries. But here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. These are not blanket bans on all immigration. They mostly target family-based immigrant visas and specific employment-based categories. Understanding that distinction, that's your first step in realizing that, yes, viable, legal pathways totally still exist.
Okay, here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll cover the reality of the visa freeze, explore the insulated EB-5 pathway, look at the set-aside advantage, compare visa routes, prepare for the real challenges ahead, and finally, outline your strategic next steps.
Let's start with Section 1, the visa freeze reality, where we'll separate fact from fiction. The reality on the ground is that these directives have a truly massive geographic footprint. We're talking about over 75 countries affected, spanning across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Nations like Nigeria, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Ghana are heavily impacted. So for individuals from these regions, traditional routes are just suddenly blocked. It's a huge disruption, and it's exactly why high net worth families are actively and urgently seeking out alternative, insulated solutions to secure their long-term plans for moving to the States.
Which brings us nicely to Section 2, EB-5, the insulated pathway, which actually operates under a completely separate statutory framework. You know, how a freeze actually impacts you depends entirely on where you sit in the timeline. If you already hold an approved I-526 or I-526E petition, take a breath. Your investment is secure. The freeze doesn't just cancel it out, though. Yeah, your final consular visa stamp might be delayed if you're outside the US. But get this, if you are already inside the US, you can actually look into adjusting your status and just bypass the consulate entirely. Now, on the flip side, if you're still in the planning stage, the sudden restriction of standard routes makes EB-5 an absolutely urgent strategic consideration. It's a congressionally authorized pathway, which means it sits in this really nice legally protected space.
And because EB-5 is legally insulated, we are seeing a massive shift in the market. It's like the quote says, when governments restrict conventional pathways, high net worth families look for routes structurally independent from executive action. The data actually shows very noticeable upticks in inquiries coming in from the Middle East, South and Southeast Asia, and Africa right now. Demand historically skyrockets when standard channels slow down, and that is exactly what the numbers are telling us today.
All right, let's jump to Section 3 and look at the set-aside advantage which was created by the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act of 2022.
This right here is honestly one of the most underappreciated features of the current EB-5 landscape. Congress actually reserved specific portions of the annual visa allocation for rural areas, high unemployment areas, and infrastructure projects. And here is the total game changer. These set-aside categories remain current for all countries worldwide. No backlog, no retrogression. This route brilliantly sidesteps those massive country-based delays for high-demand nations like China and India, all while minimizing your exposure to the freezing environment. It's fantastic.
So what's the catch? Well, it's about the capital required. For these set-aside projects, specifically those in rural areas or targeted employment areas known as TEAs, the minimum investment threshold sits at $800,000. And this lower threshold applies whether you decide to apply through a regional center or go it alone as a standalone investor, just as long as the project location actually qualifies.
Next up is Section 4, Comparing Investor Visa Routes, where we will analyze the hard data.
When we stack these alternative routes against each other, the differences are pretty stark. Look at the E2 and L1 visas. They are heavily affected by the freeze if your country is on that list. Not to mention, the E2 doesn't even lead to a green card, and the L1 is entirely employment dependent. Oh, and the proposed gold card everyone talks about? That's still just pending legislation with a massive $5 million threshold. But then you look at the EB-5 rules set aside. It offers a crystal-clear statutory path, an $800,000 investment with a timeline of just 12 to 24 months for adjustment of status, and minimal freeze impact. It simply doesn't depend on employment sponsorship or treaty relationships.
Of course, it's not without its hurdles. Let's look at Section 5, preparing for real challenges, where due diligence is absolutely key.
While EB-5 is highly insulated, we definitely need to manage expectations here. First off, if your country is on the freeze list, consular processing outside the U.S. can absolutely still stall. Second, USCIS is intensely strict right now on the lawful source of your funds. Meticulous documentation, it's completely non-negotiable. Also, you can't just rely on flashy marketing brochures. Independent project due diligence is a must to verify financial disclosures and construction timelines. And finally, keep in mind there is no premium processing here. It takes time, and it depends heavily on current USCIS workloads.
That brings us to our final section, your next strategic steps, providing you with a highly actionable playbook.
Let's walk through this playbook step by step. Step 1, check your country of birth. If you happen to hold dual nationality from an unaffected country, you might actually be exempt from the freeze entirely. Step 2, assess your current U.S. status. If you are already stateside on an H-1B, F-1, or L-1, you might be able to completely bypass those consulate delays by adjusting your status internally. Step 3, do not just use a general immigration attorney. Hire experienced EB-5 specialists who truly deeply understand these complex mechanics. And Step 4, ruthlessly verify the TEA designation on any project to make absolutely sure it is fully defensible before you commit a single dollar.
As you evaluate your options, please keep this critical framework in mind. EB-5 really should be treated as a residency strategy focused on capital preservation, rather than some high-yield financial return. Your EB-5 capital is typically at risk for several years, and the returns are usually pretty modest compared to conventional private equity. Your primary objective here is obtaining lawful permanent residence. Investors who go into this with realistic expectations about timelines and capital preservation, they tend to have a much clearer-headed and honestly, a much more successful experience.
Well, we have covered a ton of ground today. I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative question to ask yourself. Is your current residency strategy truly insulated from executive action? If traditional pathways shut down completely tomorrow, is your family's future in the U.S. actually secure? Look, the freeze has definitely made this an urgent issue, but actionable, protected pathways absolutely exist for those who are prepared to move on them. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep planning, stay strategic, and I will see you next time.